Hi, everybody. Great to be here. I'm going to speed through this because I want to get you as much information as I can in a fairly short amount of time. My good friend Peter Schiff, I describe him as the Darth Vader of economics, and I guess I'm the prince. You know, let's party till it's 1999. So I'm optimistic about where things are and the future, and I'll kind of walk you through that. I always like to start these presentations by asking a question. I want your honest answer. I don't care what your opinion is, but I'd kind of like to take the temperature of the room. John mentioned that I was the senior economic advisor to Trump during the 2016 campaign, and I'm an economic advisor to Trump for the 2020 campaign. My best friend, by the way, how cool is it that Larry Kudlow is the most important economist in the world today? I mean, is that awesome? We all love Larry. And so I'm working very closely with him. And so here's my question for you all. And be honest. How many of you have a positive opinion of the way Donald Trump has handled the economy? Raise your hand. How many of you have a negative opinion? Okay, it's about maybe 2 to 1. This is a fairly pro-Trump group. I was in Silicon Valley about 3 months ago giving a similar talk to about 250 CEOs and investors at Silicon Valley. I said, how many of you have a positive opinion of Donald Trump? There were about 250 people in the room. About 12 of them raised their hand. And I'm like, wow, it's worse here than I thought. And you know, after my presentation, we sat down, we had lunch, and literally about 30 CEOs came to me. I kind of like Donald Trump. Like, you like him? Why did you say that? And you know, people are afraid to speak out. But this is good to give me a sense of where you're at. I am not here, by the way, my purpose is not to sell you on Donald Trump. I think my purpose, where I can add value to you, is try to explain what we've done, why we did it, and how I think it's worked. And then, you can all make up your own mind about whether you agree with that. So let me just start from the top. The reason that Trump was elected is because the Obama economy didn't work very well. They tried their best, and we had a recovery. You can see this is comparing various recoveries from recessions. We've had 9 recessions since the end of World War II. The natural course of events, you come out of a recession and you get a nice pickup to make up for the lost ground during the recession. We did, by the way, Obama, we had a very resilient, durable recovery under Obama. By the way, just so you understand, the recovery that we're in right now, we should call it an expansion, right, not a recovery, that began in June of 2009. We are now in October of 2019. So this has been an extremely durable recovery. This is now, I think, maybe the longest recovery we had from a recession since the end of World War II. So very durable, but it was flat. You can see the black line is the recovery pace under Obama. The blue line, light blue line, is the recovery that you had in the typical recession, because we had the weakest recovery from a recession since the end of World War II. And you can see the economy normally would grow about twice as fast. And then you can see under the Reagan, you look, I'm a big Reagan fan. I was privileged to actually work for Reagan in his last year in office. Reagan's philosophy was, free markets. It was basically government is not the solution, government is the problem. Reduce regulation, reduce taxes, get government off the back of business, and get inflation down, and you're going to have a recovery. And you can see that, it makes a big difference. Policy matters. That's why I've been doing this for the last 35 years. And you can see the difference. We would have had about a $3 trillion larger economy in 2016 if we had a Reagan-style expansion rather than Obama expansion. And I think that explains, by the way, why Trump won the election. People in places like Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, Iowa, West Virginia, Kentucky, a lot of those Midwestern states that went for Trump, when I'd ask people on the campaign trail, how's that Obama recovery going for you? People would say, what recovery are you talking about? There were whole areas of the economy that were sort of left behind. Now, this gets to the point that Peter was talking about. I have a little different take on this. This is one of the people always ask me, what is the central tenet of Trumponomics? What is it that we're trying to achieve? What is the goal? And the goal is growth. Grow as fast as we can, because we believe that if you have prosperity and faster growth, it makes all other kind of problems easier to solve. And so what you're looking at is what Peter was just talking about. The national debt as a share of GDP. And you can see the big increase that happened under Bush and Obama, huge increase. And then you can see the projections. These are the numbers we inherited. By the way, I showed Donald Trump this exact graph 4 years ago. And you can see the projections. Those are basically being driven by two factors. One factor, of course, is demographics. That 10,000 Americans are retiring every day. There's 80 million baby boomers. I'm a baby boomer. As we retire, obviously, we're going to stop paying taxes. We're going to start collecting benefits. By the way, we have known for the last 40 years that this Titanic is headed to the iceberg. The politicians never did anything about it. And so you can see the very dangerous increase in the projected amount of national debt. And that blue line explains the other factor that's driving those dismal numbers, which is economic growth. The CBO predicts that the economy over the next 25 or 30 years will grow at about a 1.8% rate of growth. To that we say, hell no. We're America. We're not going to grow at 1.8%. We're going to make it a national mission to grow this economy at closer to 3%. And by the way, that's not shooting for the moon. The average of the national economy growth over the last 100 years has been about 3.25% to 3.5% growth. We think that we can easily achieve, with the right policy mix, an economy that grows at 3%. And if that happens, you can see that the debt as a share of GDP goes down every year. It doesn't go up every year. And that alleviates the problem. Now, look, I agree with Peter. I think the national debt is certainly a problem. I think everyone agrees with that. The one thing we have going for us right now is we have 2% interest rates. People are willing to lend us money for 2% to finance that debt. So there's a big difference between running a huge debt and paying 6% and 7% and 8%. I mean, how many of you in this room are old enough to remember 20% mortgage interest rates and 15% inflation? We don't have that economy right now. We have these bargain low interest rates. And I agree with Peter. I had a piece in the Wall Street Journal about 3 or 4 months on this, and the Treasury is now taking this under consideration. I think they're going to do it. The federal government should start issuing 50-year bonds, and we should lock in these 2% interest rates for as long as possibly can. And that shelters us from an interest rate shock, which Peter might be right. If those interest rates go up, right, we want to lock in the 2% interest rates now until forever, and that makes it much less of a burden for future generations. The stock market. You're all here because you want to make money. That's why they call it the Money Conference. And what you're looking at, many of you have heard me talk before, have seen this chart many times. I've simply updated it. And what you're looking at, the blue line, is the S&P 500. This is on a logarithmic scale. The green line is S&P 500 adjusted for inflation. You can see, the ravages of inflation in the 1970s. You can see where the green line goes down. That was the worst period for stocks since the Great Depression. So stocks from 1968 through 1982 lost 62% of their value relative to inflation. Let me say that again, just so you understand how bad the 70s were. Adjusted for inflation, stocks lost 62%, more than half of their value over a 14-year period. Can we agree that's a pretty ferocious bear market when you lose half of your money over a 14-year period? And then you can see, the blue line, you look at the huge ascent. The way I like to put it is, the clouds dispersed, the sun came out, and God gave America Ronald Reagan, right? And boom, and by the way, I'm not making a partisan point here. The economy grew even faster, and the stock market grew even faster under Bill Clinton, who was a genuine new Democrat. We cut taxes, we reduced regulations, we passed welfare reform, we cut the capital gains tax. So you can see what you're looking at, that blue ascent, that's the greatest period of wealth creation in the history of the world. The wealth of American households and businesses went from $18 trillion, think about this, they were worth $18 trillion, all of our assets minus our liabilities, $18 trillion in 1982. By the year 2000, the assets were worth $60 trillion. So we created more wealth in that 20-year period than all previous time that America had been a country. Then you can see the big dip that happened, but remember in 2000 with the dot-com bubble bursting, and then you can see the real estate crisis. But look at the last 10 years. It's been very, very positive for the stock market. This has been a big bull market run we've had. The stocks have basically doubled in value since the depths of the recession. And so people are always asking me, is this the end? Have we come to the end of the bull market expansion? And my attitude is, look, this is a really important point. Bull markets don't die of old age. Bull markets do not die of old age. Bull markets end because of policy mistakes. If you make you can look at every recession we've had, over the last 150 years, and I can tell you that I can point to the policy mistakes that were made that caused those recession. The 70s, what caused that? It was the combination of high tax rates and high inflation that killed the bull market. So my point is, look, if we continue with good policies, yeah, this bull market can last another 10 years, no question about it. If Elizabeth Warren is president, all bets are off, right? But if you get continuation of good tax and regulatory policy, yeah, I'm very optimistic. Okay. So I wanted to show you this because everybody's saying China's going to take over the world, right? And, I'm not a big believer in China. I mean, what's happened in China over the last 25 years has been an astounding thing. But, how many of you remember when people talked about Japan taking? Remember, Japan is going to take over the world, and this is what they said in the late 70s and 80s as we were struggling a bit in the 70s, and Japan just was soaring. And right at the time, all of these famous economists like Lester Thoreau were saying, oh my God, Japan's taking over the world. They're the dynasty of the future. Look at the red line. That's the Japanese stock market over the last 25 years, and the blue line is the American stock market, on an indexed scale. And you can see people who have bet on Japan made a big, big mistake. Japan has been flat for the last 25 or 30 years. We keep going up and up and up. And I would make the case that's the same thing with China. China is not going to overtake the United States. They have the wrong model in mind. They've moved more towards central planning and government control of investment, and we know from history that model doesn't work. Okay, next. Has there been a Trump effect? Has there been a change in direction in the economy? I think yes. Blue-collar jobs, this is one of my favorite ones. I showed, by the way, I was in the White House. I was in the Oval Office with the president. On Tuesday, we talked for about an hour. I showed him this chart. I mean, he was doing cartwheels over this one. But I mean, it's showing, that the blue-collar jobs are back big times. It is true, as Peter said, that manufacturing has dropped off and it's leveled off and it's gone slightly negative. But if you look at the last, 2.5 years, it's been very positive. Manufacturing, mining, construction, we've created about 1.4 million of these jobs. By the way, I'm going to throw out a number, and I wonder if anyone in this room can tell me what it is. And the number is 7.1 million. Anybody know what that number is? That is the number of surplus jobs in the United States today. Let me say that again. We have 7.1 million unfilled jobs in the United States. That has never happened before in the history of the United States. This is the best labor market for workers in the history of the country, and certainly in any of our lifetime. If you have a skill and you're looking for a job, you can find one in 48 hours. The biggest problem with the American economy today, I ask employers everywhere I go everywhere from Portland, Oregon to Portland, Maine. The single biggest problem in the economy today is employers finding workers to fill all the jobs. I was joking to the president. I said, Mr. President, stop creating so many jobs. We don't have enough workers to fill them. That's a good problem to have, by the way. Okay, we're proud of this. You know this. I showed this one to the president as well. Black unemployment. Our racist president has created the lowest black and Hispanic and Asian unemployment rate in any of our lifetimes. Those don't sound like racist policies to me. How is it happening? It didn't happen by accident. Number one, Trump reduced regulation. He promised to reduce 2 regulations for every new regulation that was passed. He lied about that. We've actually eliminated 20 regulations for every new regulation passed. Don't kid yourself. That has a huge impact on the psychological factor of businesses expanding their operations, knowing that government isn't going to come after them with a baseball bat. So that's been, I think, maybe one of the most important factors. This is my favorite Time magazine cover of the last 50 years. It's the Time editors, put it, the wrecking crew, how Trump's cabinet is dismantling government as we know it. Well, hell yes, he is. That's why we elected him, right? I mean, how stupid are these people? Of course he's a wrecking crew. What was the closing line of Trump's campaign? Drain the swamp. And we're doing the best we can to do that. Low tax rates mean more revenues. I read the Sunday New York Times today. They had 3 articles about how the rich aren't paying their fair share and the wealthy are getting away with evading taxes. It's ridiculous. Low tax rates actually lead to higher revenues, not more. This is the Laffer curve. The Laffer curve is real. You can see, we took in the 80s, we took the top tax rate from 70% down to 50%, down to 28%. When the tax rate was 70%, and the New York Times kept saying, we ought to go back to a 70% tax rate. Are they crazy? Are they lunatic? I mean, when you have 70% tax rate, first of all, the economy cratered. Second of all, the share of taxes paid by the rich actually was much lower than it is today. The red line is the share of taxes paid by the rich. And the reason, you all know the reason for that. When you have 70% tax rates, nobody pays them. Right? Nobody pays a 70% tax rate. Rich people aren't stupid, right? You get rich because you're smart, not because you're stupid in most cases. And the fact is, the lesson here is lower rates actually lead to more revenues, and that's a very positive thing. John F. Kennedy said it best. John F. Kennedy, I seem to recall, was a Democrat, and this is my favorite quote from history. There's a paradoxical truth that tax rates are too high and revenues are too low, and the soundest way to raise the revenues in the long run is to cut the rates now. Ladies, is that beautiful or what? Is that just beautiful? How many politicians agree with that today? I mean, it's on both sides. I mean, it's all about raising tax rates, which will do a significant damage to American competitiveness if we allow that to happen. This is our tax cut. It was a business tax cut, folks. The purpose of our tax cut was to cut taxes on American businesses. We're unapologetically, we want American businesses to outcompete China, Japan, Mexico, Germany, France. We want our companies to be hypercharged, and one of the ways you do that is lower your tax rates. And you can see we were at 40%, and the rest of the world, you can see those green pillars go down every year. Those are the rates that other countries were charging. We got to a situation in 2016 when we came into office that we were at 40%, the rest of the world's at 20%. How stupid is that, right? As we said to Donald Trump back in 2016, that's like putting a 20% tariff on our own goods and services, right? Who does that? I mean, it's economic masochism. And so we said, to Trump, we should get that rate. Larry and I put this plan together to get the rate from 40 down to 20%. And I remember Trump stood back and said, no, I don't want to do that. He said, I want 15. I want 15, which was great. We didn't get 15. We did get 21. And don't kid yourself, that's about a huge impact. What the United States is doing right now, reason the dollar is strong, there's a good reason why the dollar is strong. Everybody wants to invest in the United States. We're the only country that's growing. Europe isn't growing. Japan isn't growing. China's headed to a recession. Of course the dollar's strong. We have the strongest economy of the world today. And in fact, the only reason the economy isn't growing faster, in my opinion, is because the rest of the world is at zero growth. It makes it harder for the U.S. to grow when the rest of the world isn't. So this has been a spectacularly positive development. Show you a couple of more, and then energy production. Look, energy has been a major part of our economy over the last 10 years. I'll put this very simply because I'm running out of time. You cannot understand what's happened in the last 12 years or so with the American economy if you don't understand four words, because they explain the massive growth that we've had out of this recession. And those four words are very simple: shale, oil, and gas. They have changed everything. By the way, we're here in Texas, so you all know this, right? But you've got a lot of politicians now saying, get rid of shale oil and gas. How dumb is that? I mean, why would we do that? We are now producing, for the first time in 50 years, the United States is producing more oil and gas than we are importing. That is an incredible development. It's something nobody predicted 12 years ago, but it is true. None of the other countries in the world, by the way, it means energy is cheaper. Energy is the master resource. If energy prices fall, then everything else falls in price. I just thought you'd find this one kind of, by the way, let me go back to this one. Air quality is improving in the United States. I talk to young people, oh my God, no, we've reduced pollution levels in the United States over the last 50 years by 50, 60, 70, 80, 90%. This is a spectacular achievement in cities like Dallas, Los Angeles, Chicago, Nashville. The air that we breathe today is cleaner than it was 50 or 100 years ago. Most kids think it's the opposite. None of the other countries in the world are coming anywhere close to reaching their carbon reduction, greenhouse gas emission reductions under the Paris Climate Accord. I happen to think one of the best things Donald Trump did was pull America out of the anti-America Paris Climate Accord. None of the rest of them. By the way, anybody in this room tell me what country of the last 3 years has reduced its greenhouse gases the most? United States of America. And the answer, people are surprised by it. How many of you knew that, by the way? Raise your hand. Most of you didn't know that, because how would you know it? The press never reports that. The reason we've reduced our greenhouse gases so dramatically more than any other country is because we're switching to natural gas. Natural gas is a wonder fuel. It is reliable, it's cheap, it's abundant, it's made in America, and it's clean burning. It's everything you want in a fuel, and yet they want to shut it down. I don't understand the logic of that. Finally, let me just deal with the trade deal, and then I'm kind of out of time here. This is a good time to wrap this up with trade. The one black cloud on the horizon, there's two. I mentioned the fact that the rest of the world has slowed down. That puts an extra burden on the United States to get back to the 3% growth that we want. But the other factor is clearly this trade war. We have a trade war going on between the two largest countries in the world. And I remember when Larry Kudlow and I sat down with Donald Trump, and he asked us to be his senior economic advisors. We said, well, Donald, we can't be your senior economic advisor. We're for free trade, and you're not. And I'll never forget, he said, look, I'm for free trade. I just want it to be fair. I want to make sure we have a level playing field and so on and so forth. And he said, will you guys just look at the evidence? And so we did. We took a look at the evidence. These are the average tariffs around the world. Now, this is from 17, so, they don't count what's happened in the last 20 months or so. But, in the United States, Canada, Mexico, have low tariffs. That's good. I love the idea of a new NAFTA. We have to pass the U.S., Canada, Mexico trade agreement. Please, Nancy Pelosi, bring that to a vote so we can grow our economy. But look at China. Look at China. Their tariffs are 3 times higher than ours are. That's not a level playing field. And that partly explains why we have these large trade deficits. We can't live with this. We are in an abusive relationship with China. They lie, they cheat, they steal, they don't keep their word. Okay, just give me 1 more minute. And this is a problem. We can't go forward with this relationship. We have to, what we're hoping for is a reduction in tariffs on both sides of the Pacific. We lower our tariffs on them, they lower their tariffs on us, plus we need them to, start honoring our intellectual property, which they steal to the tune of about $300 billion a year. What I'm going to say, I don't care if you're for what Trump is doing or not with respect to China. I find myself in agreement with Trump. I think China, we can't go forward with this relationship, but I will say this, and maybe I'll end on this. If we get a trade deal, if what was announced on Friday, if they move forward with that, and we get even what I call a skinny deal, because that deal that was announced on Friday, that's not a big, that's not a big deal. It's not going to change the world. They're going to buy some more of our agricultural products. We're going to get rid of the latest tranche of tariffs. They're going to maybe buy some more of our manufactured products. Hopefully, we'll ratchet down our tariffs. Is that going to change the world? No. No, it's not. It's not going to change things. This epic battle that is going on with China right now is going to go on for the next 10 and 20 years. This is the epic battle of our time. But the reason that announcement was so important Friday is if they sign that deal, and if we get a détente or a truce in the trade deal for the next 2 years, you are going to see the biggest boom you ever saw in the stock market. You saw the initial wave of bullishness on Friday. If it gets signed, sealed, and delivered, because a lot of investors don't believe it will happen, and I don't know if it's going to happen or not. What I'm here to tell you is if it happens and we get that trade deal, buy America, because you're going to see a big boom both in China and the United States. It's the single healthiest thing we can do for the world economy. And if that happens, I'm bullish. I'm buying, not selling. Thank you very much. Great to be with you. Thank you.